Hello everybody, this is Joe. Hello to my fellow patriots here in America and throughout the world. Happy 4th of July to you guys. I'm going to be doing a broadcast about 15 to 20 minutes here, maybe a little longer. And we're going to begin with the picture you see here. What is it picture you see in front of you here? This is in Philadelphia. The signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776 was actually signed on July 3rd, and completed July 3rd and signed on July 4th, if I'm not mistaken. Now, if you look at all these men here, the signers of the Declaration. We're not going to go through the signers today because we all know who the signers are. You know, Hancock and all those guys. So we know who these guys are. Let's talk about a little bit about the why for the Declaration of Independence. So, let's talk about why the Declaration of Independence. So, when the colonists first landed in 1620 off the Mayflower, and we did the Mayflower Compact, that was the beginning of what was the Mayflower Compact? Why did they do the Mayflower Compact? So we could have a stable living with some rules. Now, the Mayflower Compact really didn't work too well because there was no establishments and anything that worked with it. But the important thing about the Mayflower Compact, it was the beginning of the independence of the colonists. Okay, because they wanted to develop their own way of life away from the king, even though they knew they're subjects of Britain. So during this period of time, there was a lot of difficulties for Americans, a lot of difficulties for other people, and it was very difficult during the winters and stuff. So we established it. So that was the beginning of it. But we want to move into the actual Declaration of Independence here. So the interesting aspect of what you see here, the Declaration of Independence, why the Declaration of Independence? When we talked about the Mayflower Compact, that was the beginning of Americans separated from the king and their own documentation, their own set of rules to limit this. But let's get to the serious thing about happened. What was the Declaration of Independence for? Well, remember Patrick Henry's famous speech? What was his famous speech? No taxation without representation. So, Patrick Henry was an anti-federalist, okay? And we'll do that when we talk about the Federalist Papers. But Patrick Henry was an anti-federalist. But he believed in no taxation without representation. This is what the Declaration was based upon. So in 1776, on this fateful day in 1776, every one of these men here were under the auspice of treason against the crown. They could have been hung. They could have been tarred and feathered. They could have been put on a prison ship and shipped back to England. And the important thing is, like, who's here? Like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, all these guys, you know. And the important way to look at this is how do you get all these colonies together? Remember, these colonies had individual charters. And William Penn in 1681 got the Pennsylvania Charter from King George, and it hence the name of Pennsylvania over William Penn. Just lighting up some firecrackers there, celebration. We'll watch some on TV here. We're going to go out in a few minutes and watch it. So the important thing here to look at is what? On this Independence Day, our freedom, we left the crown, we left the king under what rules? Under what reasons? As in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, and the first documentation within it was the tyranny of the king, of the crown. That all persons are equal, freedom, not to be taxed, all this stuff in the Declaration of Independence. But what actually led up to this? Because, how many years was it the king, Americans were subjects to the crown? Back since the 1600s. Okay? Remember the 1600s and early 1700s, like 1705, 1600, 1690, 1710, right around there, they're petitioning the king, the crown, not to send U.S. slaves over to the colonies. And also the way the subjects were treated. They were taxed. They were abused by the crown. They had no rights. They had standing armies. What happened before the beginning of the Revolution? The Boston Massacre, in which John Adams defended the soldiers. And why did all this happen? Why was the crown under so much control over the colonies? Why was it, like, you see what I'm saying? Why was the crown so much into the taxation of the colonies and the control of the colonies with the troops and the blockades after the Tea Party and all this other stuff? Why would all this be going on here? What was the actual meaning of this? Because here's the thing is, in America you had no rights. You could petition the king or the royal crown or the royal governor. Yes, they had the House of Burgesses. Yes, they had other like local like tax collectors which you could petition, but all went on deaf ears. So the interesting thing about this is, how did you, as a Puritan, as a colonist, or whatever you might be, at that period of time, get all together and decide we're going to go for the Declaration of Independence? What made that happen? It had to be many things. Now, 1775, they had the Stamp Act. But the Stamp Act didn't last as long as that long, okay? Then they had the other acts. They had the Molasses Act. They had other acts related to taxation. They had the Commonwealth Acts, if I'm not mistaken, those, taxing everything. So the colonies were being taxed but not represented. And if they were being represented, they're not being represented properly under the king, because in order to get satisfaction for whatever you need, you'd have to petition the crown, the king. Like I just said, you can't petition the local governor, but the local governor only had limited abilities. And the courts are under the crown. Everything was under the crown. So you look at this, like, you got these delegates together. Now, Benjamin Franklin really worked on this. He also worked on the Articles of Confederation, also worked on the 1787 for what? You get Declaration of Independence. So the thing about all this is you're looking at these individual men here, how they got together in secret to draft the Declaration of Independence, because they knew it could happen to them. But here's the thing is, they had to make sure they knew who it was going to be able to what? To be able to run an army. They knew the king was not going to allow the British Americans to leave the crown. And remember, and just before that was Lexington. Okay? So the war has already started. The Declaration of Independence has already started. The war has already started. So we haven't done it yet. Now, the Declaration of Independence is one of the most important documents in American history. Now, I have the Declaration of Independence. We can talk about the drafts of it. We can talk about what's written in it. But we're just going to talk about some happenings in here. But if you look at history, look at the writings of these individuals here. Okay, Patrick Henry, those guys. If you look at them, look at the writings of them. Now, Patrick Henry didn't sign the Declaration of Independence. If I'm not mistaken, he didn't sign it. Okay, he wasn't one of the delegates. But the important thing is, under what pretense did Americans, we had enough of the crown. We don't want the crown anymore. Because everybody at this time is so far from the crown that they don't have any reference to the crown other than their British subjects. You see what I'm saying? So I'm European in descent. I've never been to Europe. I don't have no ties to Europe. That's like the colonists. You're talking about 1770s. Okay? America was controlled by the king since the 1600s. Okay? But the reason they're doing this stuff about taking all this money, doing all this stuff here, is what reason? One reason is taxation. They want to get money, they want to get paid, they want to get money from the wars they were having with what? With the French and Indian Wars. Also, the French and Indian Wars in England and on the high seas and on the Canadian border with the French and Indian Wars, which Washington fought in early 1760s. So the representation was only representation for taxation. Under what authority did the crown have? Okay, under what authority did the crown have to control the people of America to pay for the king's battles and the king's armies? And this is why people got tired of it. They got tired of the taxation, the representation, but the non-representation. You petition the king, you give what you want. These delegates are highly important people. Okay? John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, not Monroe, many others, many others, Hancock and those guys, many others. And the 54 signers of the Declaration of Independence, I might be confusing the Declaration of Independence with the Constitution, with the Constitution and the amendments to the Constitution, not the amendments to the Constitution, but the actual Constitution itself, the debates of the Constitution in 1787. So I understand. So let's look at this here now. Once you sign the Declaration of Independence, it was automatically published. 200 copies were published, and it was handwritten on parchment paper. That's what's in the National Archives at this time. And the important thing about this is, once this declaration was signed, once it was delivered, that was it. There was no coming back. You couldn't go back from it. You couldn't return it. You couldn't say no, change your mind. That was it. So here's the important thing. Now let's look at this, the signage of the Declaration of Independence. Did any of them get arrested? No. None of them got arrested to my knowledge, but many of them had difficult lives, died poor, or died unknown, or died with any reverence to them, other than Jefferson, Adams, guys like that. Of all the senators, there's very few people that are known. Now I can get my declaration, we can go over that, that's fine. But we're just going to talk a little bit about the actual Declaration of Independence. So here's an important thing about the Declaration of Independence. When it was signed, like I said a few minutes ago, by all the signers knew what could happen to them, but they did it anyway. And you have to look at that, which we talked about a few minutes ago, but we're going to talk about it again for a second. So they knew signing the Declaration of Independence could put them to death, could put them in a prison camp, could do many things to them, but it didn't. Okay? Because the thing about this was, all the colonies were together on the battle that could happen, that's going to happen in the war with England. And the war with England was long and brutal. It went to 1783 at Yorktown. And one of the critical things about the war, and one of the critical things about the Declaration of Independence and the war, America was respected. Okay? Then we had the Articles of Confederation. Then we had the Constitutional Convention. Then we had the convention. And then and the important thing is not only was the Declaration of Independence signed and delivered, it gave us that time of celebration. Like John Adams said, he said, we're going to be having illuminations for years and years and years and celebrations. And the important thing about this is here, the Declaration of Independence not only is one of our most well-known, well-revered documents, it's what gave America, and what gave the American colonists the rights that we all hold truthfully today until we had the Declaration of Independence with the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And this was, an important aspect in world history. And nowhere in the history, the Declaration of Independence is one of the most important documents that you can look at. You can look at Magna Carta, or you can look at all these other things. But the important thing about this is that we're celebrating the Declaration of Independence today, July 4th, 2025, and next year's its 150th celebration. And those who signed the Declaration were revered through history, and that's what America's all about. So I just want to talk to you guys a little bit about the Declaration of Independence, give you guys a little history lesson, a little tidbit here. Thank you very much and have a great day. I appreciate you guys. And this is Joe, and we will talk to you later. And happy 4th of July. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye.